Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Hey, if you tuned in last time, we have special guest Riley Gaines for part one of our series. And this week we pick up right where we left off on her journey to save women's sports, to protect girls and women from unfair and unsafe competition against men. Here we go. Buckle up. You're going to love it.
I've got it covered.
I love your father. I need to meet him someday. I love your dad.
I'm very blessed.
So you talk him off the ledge. He's not coming in, but he wanted to come in.
Most, yeah. I would say all good dads did. Yeah. They're just not okay with their babies, their daughters. I don't care. My dad doesn't care how old I am, even being 24 years old now. I'm still his little girl, you know. Yes. He was not okay with a man, flashing himself in that way to me and my teammates. He just wasn't. But that's how majority of parents felt. But again, and I can speak to what they told us to keep us quiet. They told us if we oppose this, it's the same thing that they did to African Americans in the 1960s, and we would be the equivalent to racist, and history would not look kindly on us, and you know we would lose our scholarship. They said, Riley, remember you signed that, and you signed it voluntarily, and when you did, you gave away your rights to speak in your own personal capacity. You know, remember who you represent. Remember whose name is across your chest and across your cap, because it's not yours. It's ours, and we've already taken your stance for you. They told us we would lose friends. We would never get a job. Our employer was going to look us up, and they would never hire someone so openly transphobic. They said we were equivalent to murderers if we spoke out about this, because we would have blood on our hands. And they would say, you don't want to be a murderer, do you? No, so I suggest you be kind, and I suggest you be inclusive. I could go on for hours, really.
Now, and who is telling you this? Your athletic department, your coaches, your conference? Who's telling you this? This is incredible.
Truthfully, we had a lot of support within the athletic department. Like I said, my athletic director, Mitch Barnhart, who's been the AD at Kentucky for 20 plus years, phenomenal guy, a good Christian who leads by example. He was great throughout this whole process. My coach, of course, was very supportive of the stance that I have taken. Most of this came from the academia side of the university, sending in, media training professionals who taught us how to use pronouns. I had to go to a training as a 21-year-old senior in college where they taught me how to use she, her pronouns in a sentence. And I had to keep going through the training until they felt like they were satisfied, until I had been properly re-educated. So a lot of that stemmed from the academia side of the university and professionals. That's what they called themselves. Professionals that they had brought in to help us be okay with this.
So think about this. At the time, you're what, 21? That's
right. Yes, sir.
You're 21 years old. You're a young woman, a competitor. You've worked your entire life to be in this situation. You face and like most of us, a lot of times we'll encounter situations that we don't expect. They catch us off guard. We don't know exactly what to do, what to say, how to handle it. And we're kind of caught flat-footed. And it feels like that, right? You're faced with this circumstance that you never thought you would face. Here's this full-blown naked man in your locker room. And by the way, and you know this now better than anybody, this wasn't the only time this happened. This happened everywhere. I mean, this isn't an isolated circumstance. And we've come to realize this is actually happening in programs and in a whole lot of different sports, from MMA to boxing to cross country to you name it, to soccer. It's happening everywhere. So you're caught off guard, you compete, you tie. Now God opens up, honestly, divine intervention opens up this opportunity where now you've hit your limit of what you're willing to take, and you decide to stand up and to speak out. When did that happen? Did you come back at the NCAA official, or were you just like, this is just not right? When did you start to stand up and speak out?
Yeah, I describe it pretty mildly, but truthfully in that moment, having just competed, right, your heart rate is high, your adrenaline is pumping. It really got pretty fiery, of course, with this man standing right next to me. I didn't care. I'm like, you're going to give the trophy to the man in the women's 200 free. And from there, it was just unleashed. And of course, my my competitors and the other 6 girls who were around me who had just competed in the A final, they're like, Riley, calm down. And it was at that point, it was over for me. And I was, it's so weird how pivotal that moment was. I just flipped a switch and it was enough. And so it was that next day. Of course, after this incident, I had tons of reporters who had reached out from virtually every network. I have no idea. It's pretty remarkable how they're able to, they find your social media or your Instagram or your email somehow, and they're reaching out saying, hey, we'd love to get a quote, but to no prevail thus far for them. No one had been willing to talk to them at all. And finally, it was actually the Daily Wire. That was the first outlet that I decided to speak to. And I shared with them everything. I shared the locker room. I shared the trophy incident. I shared it all. And from there, of course, I think it blew up for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously it's absurd. And it gave people a deeper look into the absurdity of it. But two, it's because sports is really it's a unifying thing.
Yes.
And it's a lot more interesting too than the economy or the environment. Everyone loves sports.
Everybody loves sports, right?
Exactly.
Everybody loves it.
So the story just took off, and it's wild because I was in dental school following college. So that was what was next for me. Actually, endodontics, which is a specialized dentist who performs root canals.
Oh man, so nobody likes you. That's a tough spot.
I think half the country doesn't like me now. So exactly.
I'd say a small
still working
percentage.
on getting to the root of the problem coming out of people's mouths.
I love it.
It's kind of still like a root canal.
You can't write this any better than this. Come on.
No. But in those few months before dental school, I decided I would just say yes virtually to every opportunity that came my way, every media hit, every interview, every opportunity. And in that brief amount of time, it's amazing the doors that God just opened. Yeah. And so, of course, upon, really getting into school and things like that, I had to make a decision because there's no way I could do them both. Yeah. And there was so much prayer and thought and consoling others around me. What do I do? And I just decided I had one final God wink where that's what I call it. But I called the dental school and I told them, something has come up in my personal life. I just don't know if I can continue right now. What do I do? And the lady from admissions on the other side, she said, Riley, I know who you are and I know what you do. And I love what you do. She said, you will have far more impact doing that than you will ever have being a dentist. She said, you pursue that and we will hold your spot. So if you want to come back in a year, 2 years, whatever it is, we will hold your seat, your application, your deposit, all of the money that you've paid. It's here, but go fight the fight because it's a worthwhile one. Wow. And that was it for me. That was coming from someone within the program. So it was like God just saying, I've got you. Yeah. You just go.
Amazing. And it's a window of time, right? And so important. I remember at the time, and I've told you that you're courageous, and you say something to the effect of, well, you didn't feel courageous. And I laugh because in hindsight, it's obvious to see, because at that moment, I had just left my career in sports ministry and jumped into the fray for freedom. You were one of the first big causes that we got behind, this idea of protecting women and girls in sports from unfair and unsafe competition. And I'll never forget it. You were the only voice. You were it. And I know you don't like to hear, you were the only one. And it always takes someone who's willing to do it, right? That first person who's willing to say, wait a minute, this is not okay. It's not right. And we have to do something about it. It took an incredible amount of courage. It probably didn't feel like it because you're so fired up. You're a competitor. You were just standing up to do the right thing. Is that why you felt like, wow, it was just a matter of fact, this was what I was called to do at this moment?
It's really hard for me to believe that we have decayed so much as a society to where it is brave to say men and women are different.
Right.
Even this executive order that President Trump just signed declaring there are two sexes, and the whole world is, at least the sane people are celebrating. But to me, it's like, I have a hard time celebrating this because this is essentially like someone signing a law that the sky is blue.
Right.
Duh. You know, like,
right. And it can be undone. Like, the crazy part of this is another executive order from another progressive woke politician could undo it someday. It's absolute insanity right now.
Exactly. So I just have a hard time believing that is what constitutes as brave. And I understand it does, because so many people I admire, people I've looked up to for a long time, professional athletes, even both male and female, who everyone knows have reached out and said, you keep going, you keep pushing, you know, that kind of thing. But they haven't found it within themselves to stand up.
Too much is at stake. I know.
It just is, it's mind blowing to me. That doesn't feel brave. What's brave is our military members and our law enforcement and first responders. That's what bravery is, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways to be a hero, a lot of ways to be courageous, a lot of ways to be brave. And in our culture today, incredibly, like you said, it takes courage to go against the flow, where before, you know, I mean, I was taught that it's empowering to go against the flow. Don't do what everybody else is doing. Stand up for the truth and righteousness. Speak out for people that can't speak up for themselves. I mean, these are all just traditional values that we've seemed to have forgotten. So it's refreshing when someone like you is willing to take a risk. I realized at the moment you did this, you were taking an incredible risk. You were sacrificing. You were prepared to sacrifice your future. You were prepared to sacrifice your reputation. You really were prepared for all that. That's heroic. It really is. And I know you're going to hate me telling you that, but that's heroic. And we need more heroic people. And what I love about what you did was that I have a 22-year-old daughter, Grace, and you know of her, you know of her story, the book Strong Girls that she and I wrote together. The fact that you did what you did makes my daughter so much more courageous and emboldened to stand up for truth in whatever circumstances she's called to stand up. So it's a pivotal moment. It was a big deal. And then I think from there, what I think I was most impressed with what you did was you started to speak on college campuses. I know you were representing Turning Point at some point. You were representing the Leadership Institute. You weren't always well received on college campus. So I think that's the understatement of the century right there. Yeah. But you even encountered violent protests. Tell us a little bit about San Francisco State. I think it was San Francisco, right? Where you went? Sir. Okay, yes, tell us a little bit about that.
Gosh, what a whirlwind that was. So I show up to San Francisco State University, which I live in Tennessee. I'm very well received in my little small town in the middle of nowhere, right? Everyone is conservative here. So I knew I was getting into a little bit of a different climate, college campuses in general, but of course, going into San Francisco, the belly of the beast, I thought I knew what I was getting myself into. But I was wrong to believe that these students and community members would come with an open mind and the willingness to have their hearts softened, because they did not. They came with pitchforks and fire. And upon delivering my message, again, to a room full capacity of people who protesters. That was, of course, their tactic, is the protesters fill up the room before those who came in support could.
Wow.
So I'm delivering this message to, people holding signs. It's the visual in your head. That's what I was actually seeing in real life. But nonetheless, that's who needs to hear it, right? But these protesters ended up at one point in the speech, of course, getting up, opening the door that was locked to the outside. Hundreds more rushed in, and they turned off the lights to the room, and they ambushed me at the front of the room, right? Like classroom setting, there's a whiteboard behind me, and they just rush me, and I'm being pushed, and I'm being shoved, and I'm being punched in the face by these men wearing dresses, which fortunately for me, their punches don't hurt that bad. Right? But nonetheless,
my money's on you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
These protesters ended up holding me for ransom for about 4, almost 5 hours, demanding that if I wanted to make it home to see my family safely again, I had to pay them money.
Unbelievable.
You might be wondering, where were the police?
Yeah.
We were in San Francisco, so they were being held for ransom with me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Were these
And
campus police? Were these state police? Who were these people?
these were campus police
Mm-hmm.
initially. And then the city of San Francisco police, of course, they came and they got involved, but really to no prevail. They said it's out of our authority. We have to ask our higher ups if we can do our job to get you out of here. It was the most absurd thing I've ever witnessed, been a part of in my life. And the things that in the 5 hours, again, we were trapped in this room with the protesters banging on the door, breaking windows, trying to get in, screaming the most profane, obscene, heinous things you could possibly imagine, yet all the while claiming to be the party of love and tolerance and acceptance and welcoming. And it was just demonic, really. It was. And you could feel it. You just look in their eyes and these people look soulless, which is scary. And so, of course, my first reaction is to pray. Before I even pray for my own safety, it's to pray for these people who are so lost, who are desperately looking to put their identity into something. But of course,
very true.
I know the only place we will ever be satisfied is putting our identity in Christ.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, first of all, I've seen video of this, right? Whatever video was available, we've seen it. There's probably much more video even that we haven't seen. And I was thinking to myself, first of all, how terrifying it is for you as a young woman to be in that situation, because a lot of bad things can happen to young women in situations where mobs are out of control, making threats that as you said, are demonic. Was there ever a point when you thought you were really your life was in jeopardy?
Of course.
Yeah.
And I don't say that lightly, because again, I am one of those people to detriment that thinks I'm invincible, right? Like I feel like I'm, which again, it's not a good thing and it drives my husband crazy, but I am always that person. No, I'm fine. I'm good. Whatever.
Yeah. I can't wait till my daughter hears this.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
She's going to say, Dad, see, look.
Exactly. But in that instance, I was pretty scared. Just because, again, the things they were screaming, they were going to do to me, they were going to do to my family, how they wouldn't let me out. It was, and to see the nonchalance that how nonchalant the officers were too, knowing that they were unwilling to do their job. They told me we were not allowed to do anything because we cannot be seen as anything other than an ally to that community, or else we'll lose our jobs. So just knowing how they weren't willing to do what they needed to do, it was scary for sure.
Unreal. And here again, this speaks to courage, right? We've got a bunch of people who are there to protect you. That is their actual job. And they didn't have the courage to do what they had to do to protect you. Really. They really didn't protect you. And they certainly didn't get you released. There obviously had to be outside forces that were able to clear that room and get you out. I mean, it's disturbing, but it's that progressivism that kind of rots your soul, rots your courage, rots your ability to stand up for what's right. And that's why I'm so passionate about rooting out this Marxist woke progressivism, because it is a plague of the soul. It destroys your identity and it destroys your courage to do the right thing. So I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad that has passed. I know that wasn't the only time that you ever received opposition, probably the worst that you've experienced, I would imagine. From there, you've said, did that empower you? Did it embolden you? Because I've heard you say this: when they want you silent, speak louder. Did you leave that experience thinking, are you kidding me? I'm doubling down on this? Or were you like, hey, maybe we just chill out a little bit?
Yeah, it really only reassured me, right? and when thinking about it, when I'm thinking what I'm there to do, merely just explain the perspective of the issue of the gender ideology movement coming from a person who had been impacted by it with lived experience. I wasn't sharing anything opinionated. I was there to share a lived experience. Everything was factual, and to see how desperately they tried to shout it down, not by means of logic or reason or science or asking questions or anything like that, because that's not on their side. So their only option is to resort to name calling or violence. And in that instance, unfortunately, it was the latter. And so it just displayed to me that's the lengths they'll go to try and deter this conversation from even taking place, which really just showed me you're right over the target. You know, you don't waste ammunition on targets you don't want to hit. So to me, it was, yeah, that only really, and it had the opposite effect that they wanted it to. It really only, weirdly enough, gave me more credibility. It gave me more of a platform.
Oh, big time.
So again, joke's on them, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It always backfires, you know, this nonsense. I was thinking just from a biblical perspective, you know, there was always a cost for standing up for righteousness, always. I mean, we learn about Paul, we learn about all of the greats, all of the men and women of the Bible that stood up for righteousness, that did the right things. There was always opposition. In fact, there was usually suffering. There was usually sacrifice to some extent, big extent, you know, but it's worth it. I mean, now we fast forward a couple of years now and we see where we're sitting. We're winning. I mean, we're winning the battle of ideas. We're winning the hearts and minds of people. We're actually awakening people who really knew that this whole movement is nonsense and demonic in many ways. Now it's popular, right? We're winning. It's popular. Athletes. I mean, I see almost every week there's athletes coming out, which thank God. Thank God. That's what it takes. Coaches, administrators, conference leaders, even Olympic associations are standing up and speaking out. Their experiences are adding fuel to the fire. Tell us a little bit about the wins, because I want to encourage our listeners, and then I want to share with them how to get involved.
Absolutely. And that's a good point to kind of to wrap the conversation with, because while it might sound grim and it might sound scary, and you might listen to some of what I've been through, and you might think, oh my gosh, I would never do that to myself. Let me just say the support that I've received is tenfold the negative, tenfold. Yes. Anyways, so that, number one, but yes, there have been so many wins, and we have, I mean, in strides in 2 years, we've seen a lot of wins, of course, with President Trump coming into office. So most recently, he has signed an executive order dismantling DEI from federal agencies, from declaring that there are only two sexes. Again, crazy that we have to do that, furthering or going on to then define male and female, utterly insane, but nonetheless a win. Similar legislation has been passed in 9 states thus far. Just a few weeks ago, we saw Congress pass HR 28, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, with bipartisan support, hardly, but two Texas Democrats voted. Two
Texas Democrats, which of course they probably had some pressure to do the right thing.
They just don't want to lose their seat.
Yeah, exactly.
But nonetheless, bipartisan support, which is more than what we could say when it was introduced in the 118th Congress. So it will go on to the Senate, where it will truthfully likely die. But nonetheless, President Trump is to sign an executive order on the women's sports issue specifically soon. So lots of wins at the federal level, definitely. As you said, we've seen specific sport governing bodies come out now and take a bold first step in prioritizing fairness and safety over inclusion.
Amazing.
Another big win, and again, I think a testament to how the culture is shifting, is what we saw this year in the sport of women's volleyball in the Mountain West Conference. We saw girls and teams who ultimately decided to boycott. This is a project that we have dubbed with Turning Point, Project Boycott, with emphasis on the word boy.
Love it. I love it. I've seen the gear. Like, I need to get the gear.
Yeah, right. Actually, it's funny you say that, because we partnered up, and it's released today, with XXXY Athletics. Jen Say, she was just incredible. She just released some boycott shirts on her website.
And she was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Phenomenal. So the
fantastic.
Fact that you're partnering, I got to get more stuff. I got to get more gear.
There we go. Right. Exactly. But again, it's proof that we have had enough, and that should give you hope. And I think the wins will keep on coming, but we have to make them. They won't, if we do not hold our leaders' feet to the fire. That's our job, both elected and unelected leaders. It is our job as American citizens to make sure they do what they say they're going to do, or they represent us, the people, especially in regards to those who are elected to represent us.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about the wins. It feels good. It does feel good to win. And especially on an issue like this, which is so central to our culture, to our belief system, to our values as a nation. You've started the Riley Gaines Center through the Leadership Institute. So you're you're sparking movements, legitimate movements with ambassadors, this kind of ground swelling grassroots movement of people who are there to save women's sports and really to protect girls from unsafe and unfair competition, to restore sanity to sports, and also really fight for traditional American values. And one thing I've had an opportunity the last couple of weeks is to listen to your Gains for Girls podcast. Love that. It's so good. It's so timely. And we have a lot of coaches. We've got a lot of parents, a lot of young athletes that need to listen to that podcast because it gives you real life practical ways to push back. So thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about what you think people can do to engage in this. People that want to make a difference. What are the best ways to do it?
Absolutely. Well, number one, keep having the conversation. Keep talking about it. Use plain language. I can't stress the importance of that enough. Do not fall for, I mean, think of what Satan does. Again, to kind of, not to make this, overly biblical in the sense of how we address this issue, because it's not limited to just Christians who are affected or who can make impact, but that's what Satan does, is he rephrases things and repackages things to make them more palatable.
Very true.
That's exactly what we've seen with this gender ideology movement.
Very true.
Use plain language.
Yes.
I mean, I'm even called, like, the pronoun stuff.
Yeah.
He's a he. Okay.
Right.
The even referring to someone as a trans woman, I just won't do it. It implies there's some sort of woman. No, it's a man, right? Yeah. Use plain language for clarity purposes and because it matters. And ultimately, unclear language, it's harmful. Yes. So that, number one. Number two, it's important to, of course, follow what's going on at the federal level, but far more important than the federal level and legislation that's being introduced and passed there is, of course, the state level and the local level. That's where you see the real impact on your community. Yes. I would encourage every single person of all ages, all races, it doesn't matter. No identity factor matters. Get involved with local politics. Yes. I'm not saying you have to run for school board. I'm not saying any of that. But you can support the people who are doing those things. Yes. It's our civil duty, actually, to be involved. And so I think those things, as you said, you can get some merch, shop at XXXY Athletics, whether it's the boycott gear or anything. Yes. Your body is your best form of real estate. Wear it like a billboard. Yes. Wear your values loud and proud. Unitas, Jonathan Isaac, he's another one who is just a great ambassador for Christ. Yes. So I think that's all things are important, again, to shifting the culture, and that's how we win the country. Yes.
Yes. It's all done at the grassroots level. I was just thinking that I have friends that found out that boys were allowed in the girls' bathroom. And what we coached them to do was, like, you need to go talk to the administration of the school. You need to expose it. We're at a point now where having those conversations, because of the groundwork that you and others have laid, we now can have that conversation. And there's no one that should be afraid to have that conversation if they have kids in school. This is something that parents need to get more active, I think, right?
Absolutely. Because if you won't defend your own children, then who will,
Yes. I was thinking today, like, if I had kids that were coming up and they were in this unfair and unsafe competitive environment, if I had a daughter who was competing against young men or boys, that it would be the time where you walk onto the court and you stop the game, or you pull your daughter, or we're at the point now where we can't tolerate this unsafe, unfair competition. We can't tolerate boys in girls' locker rooms and bathrooms anymore. It's just, we're past the point of tolerating it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, hey, listen, thank you so much, Riley, for everything you've done. Thanks for spending so much time here. You're going to encourage our audience to really take action. And we're going to do everything we can to continue to fuel the fire so that we can take back the culture.
Onwards. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. This is great.
You're the best. God bless you.